All right, so today is Friday and it's wonderful. It's not going to be a hot day today, which is great. For us, hot is like anything above 80. Or for me, I should say, anything above 80 is hot. I know most people would laugh at that, but for us, that's kind of warm. But anyhow, today it's supposed to be 77, I think, or 71. I don't know. Anything. It's going to be above or lower than 80, so that's a great thing. But you don't care. What this video is about is sound transit and the stink it's causing with local businesses in terms of their expansion of the Tacoma Link light rail line. Now, let's first back up a little bit and talk about Tacoma Link and what it does. Tacoma Link was the first project that Sound Transit did when it came to rail in the entire region. So from Everett all the way down to Tacoma, the first project they ever did was here in Tacoma. And so they built the light rail. They call it a light rail line, but basically it's a streetcar. The vehicle is a streetcar that's been used in other places. And we have 3 of them. So typically, even on a full day, they run 2 of those cars and one hangs out in the maintenance facility. And so then they swap them out, right? They recycle them out. And you have one as a backup and 2 that operate on this 1.3 mile section, right? So why it was decided to put it in Tacoma first, I don't know, or how that came about, I don't really know. But to me, it was an example for Sound Transit. It was kind of like a test to see how well they could do it, how fast they could do it. It was kind of a learning measure, it seems, in terms of Sound Transit. That's just my opinion, right? Also, at the time, Tacoma was going through a lot of issues. You know, we talk about the stereotypes of Tacoma that people hold on to today, which are not correct. Back then, it was true for Tacoma. And so putting the light rail line through Tacoma really changed the city. It took a while, but it actually started changing the city, and the fruits are paying off today. You know, a decade or so later, the progress is starting to actually show. Hold on one second. So, at any rate, back now, sorry. So, Sound Transit basically built the line, and it opened, I think, in 2003. And it was really something that was needed in Tacoma. Because, again, if you look back, I mean, 96 was when it was actually, the ballot measure was passed to actually get this started, and it was approved. And so if you look at the 1990s, Tacoma was going through a lot of issues. That area that they actually put the Link Light Rail was going through a lot of stuff, and no one really wanted to be down there. Tacoma was doing a lot of different things at that point, from having, basically patrols downtown as far as the police and the beautification effort, picking up trash and all of that. Meanwhile, University of Washington Tacoma started to invest into downtown and took over some of the old buildings and warehouses that were just falling down. And then, of course, the Link Light Rail came in and started putting that track down. The museum campus was being built. So all that happened at a critical point. If any of those things didn't happen, I don't think you would see the progress that you see today. Well, during that time, as they're building in areas that were pretty much vacant. A lot of the buildings you see along Pack Avenue that have businesses in them today didn't really have anything going on at the time. And so all of the construction that was going on really did not bother folks as bad, because there was really no businesses along that corridor. And as they got further into downtown, you had plenty of other places you can navigate and get to. And also, downtown is more walkable, so if you can't get there because the street is closed off, you can still walk to it, because that's kind of the nature of downtowns anyway, right? So there wasn't much of an issue at the time, and people thought anything that's an investment in Tacoma is a great thing. I'm sure you had people at the time that hated it, but it was a great thing. So it went from the Dome District, and the Dome area became kind of the transit hub. Now you have a bus transit hub down there, so the buses for Tacoma in the region, pretty much this is where they go to. So buses actually can take you all the way into Seattle, but they can also take you all the way down to Olympia, believe it or not. So, and as well as throughout the region. And so it has now become the hub. So then with Freight House Square, where we have our pottery store, the Painting Panda, you have a section there that Amtrak has started to use. So Greyhound moved their bus station that they had. They relocated to where the all the buses are. So the bus hub down there in Tacoma. Then right over the street over in the same general section is where you have Freight House Square and the parking garage and all of that. And so the Tacoma Link actually ends right there. So they call it the Tacoma Dome Station. So there's all this parking, all that stuff. Now, with Freight House Square, you have a place where you can get on Amtrak as well as the Sounder commuter train. So all of that has created this huge point of where you can pretty much be in any part of the Puget Sound region and be able to get into Tacoma and a lot of the other parts of the region. It's maybe a long haul, but you could do it. So now the Tacoma Link is expanding all the way into the Hilltop area. Now, again, Hilltop has had a struggle, and a lot of the negative stereotypes about Tacoma either exist because of Hilltop and or due to the waterfront and what it used to look like back in the day. Both areas have changed drastically since then. And you don't have nearly the same problems, but it's still, Tacoma gets that grit city image, and it's known as the grit city because of the factories and just everything else, right? Well, along that area, as the light rail goes up from McMenamins, because it's going to go up through that area and then go into the Stadium District, going to turn on to Division, and then go down MLK, Martin Luther King. And so as it goes down MLK, it runs right through the heart of Hilltop. Now, one of the key things, Kitty scratched himself, so his foot's hitting the door. One of the things about this is that as it's being constructed, there's a lot of things that have to be done for a streetcar system. One, cities nowadays didn't really plan for a revival of the streetcar. A lot of cities had light rail systems and streetcar systems and interurbans and different things that connected every place. Well, they dug all that stuff up and threw it away. And since then, the cities will go through and lay sewer lines, water lines, gas lines, and in some cases, electrical lines, and just put it under the street and didn't care, right? No problem. Sometimes they put them under sidewalks, but typically under the streets. So what happens is that if you're going to ever have light rail or a streetcar, you have to dig all that stuff up and relocate it. So usually the utility companies, the gas company, for example, will have to come out, dig up their section, remove the gas line, so shut it all off, move it to a different area, and then cover it back up. That's one construction. The second construction would be the sewer. They would have to dig up the sewer department would dig up that bit of pipe and then relocate it to a different area within that zone and then cover that up. That's construction number 2. Construction number 3 would be the water line. They would have to dig along that area again and remove the water line. The reason for that is because the weight of that streetcar, even though they're preparing for it, is going to dislodge things. The weight is part of the problem. So having any of those things there presents a bigger issue farther down the line, and then you would have to dig under the track, you would have to redo things, and it just costs a lot of money. It's much easier that if a pipe were to get old or what have you, it's not going to interfere with the light rail line, which is going to be there forever, well, supposedly forever. So they move it out of the way just in case if they need to maintain it, work it, replace it, whatever, they don't have to interrupt a streetcar system that is extremely expensive to replace. That's why. So you have construction number 3 when you're dealing with that. If there's any sort of electrical lines or anything like that, that's going to be number 4. And then when you're rerouting some of the water lines, because you have to move the line, you have to move all this stuff, you have to do other construction projects to connect those businesses to those end results, right? So there's a lot of construction involved. Then there is the tearing up of the road and then putting in all of the foundation support for the light rail system, you literally have to build it up with a lot of different aggregate. So it has to be pretty deep, not like your typical road. It has to be fairly deep because, again, this is a very heavy, compact piece of equipment. So then after they do that, and if you notice along all light rail systems, it's typically always concrete, unless they build it on grass and soil. It typically is going to be concrete just because of the weight of this vehicle. But anyway, so there's a lot of construction involved in the process. Now, whether or not it should take as long as it should, or whether or not it should be as expensive as it should, that's a completely different argument, because I don't think it should. You can go to many other countries, many other places that have a similar type of setup, and it's a lot cheaper. Now, people will point to the fact, well, here people own property and they own this and they own that. Well, they do the same thing in Japan. Japan is almost identical to the US in many different respects in terms of income and property rights, all of that type of stuff. And it doesn't take nearly as long for them to replace a road or to build anything. It's done pretty quick. And they also have a lot more issues to deal with in terms of earthquakes. You can pick any place in the US and they can't just do it as fast as what happens in Japan and other places in Europe. It takes forever. One of the reasons is because we're overly regulated, in my opinion. My two cats are fighting. We're overly regulated, in my opinion. And there's so many tests that you have to do. And so there's all this excuse, but really and truly, it's really overly priced to build something that's very simple. Keep in mind, there was a time when people used to build railroads by hand, and they built it a lot faster than machine does today. Now, yeah, there were a lot of people that died because of that, because there's not a lot of safety measures. But again, you compare it to today in other countries, and they're able to do it much faster. Totally different story. But along this path, there has been a lot of business owners who are upset because it is disrupting business. It has taken forever for them to actually do anything, and so it's cutting off vital areas to these businesses. Now, keep in mind, some of these streets, you can't really go around and get to that business. It's because you're now starting to get on the fringe areas of downtown, and it's more designed, as a lot of cities are, for cars. So the problem is that even if you wanted to go to this particular business, you're able to drive there and park. But now, because of all the construction and all of that, there's really no easy way to get to it, right? There's really no way to do it. And given the volume of traffic that's starting to increase in Tacoma, the lack of parking that's starting to happen in Tacoma, it makes it very difficult. So there are businesses along that area that are complaining. One's a pizza joint that hasn't been open that long. He's saying that he's losing $20,000 a month. And he's already lost $60,000 over the course of 3 months of this construction. And he said they're not even done yet. So he's complaining about it. And trust me, $20,000 a month, if I lost $20,000 a month, I wouldn't even know what to do. Like I would cry every night. But at any rate, there's also other businesses that have been there that are losing businesses because businesses have to shut down earlier. They're just not getting the people coming in. You still have to pay your employees regardless of if someone walks through the door or not. So a lot of places are shutting down early. So it's affecting businesses, right? So people are really pissed off about Sound Transit. And the Sound Transit down here has a completely different view, I think, than up in Seattle. Up in Seattle, it's Golden City because they've built up Seattle quite a bit. Seattle has the airport and downtown are connected. They're building subway systems and tunnels and all the posh. But every place else, in terms of like, if you look up at Everett, they don't have nothing. And they've been paying into the system. Nothing. And they're not going to have nothing for a while. And I mean, I'll be retiring by the time Everett gets their light rail system. Then you have down here, at least we actually have the Tacoma Link. Now we'll take it back. Sound Transit did put commuter rail all the way from Everett down here to Tacoma. This was using existing track that's already there. All they did was buy the trains and put down stations. It's not that hard, especially when you're pulling in tons of money, right? This is not just to bash Sound Transit because there's certain things that have to take their side on with this. But the reality is they're taking way too long. And the reason why I think they're taking way too long, or they're making excuses as to you want to get it done right, is because of the simple fact it's a legacy project. They're looking for people who are my age that start a job there and that can retire. I really think that's the case. If you look at the project, there are people who can start in their 20s, work for the construction of Sound Transit or what have you, and basically retire because it's going to take 30, 40 years for them to complete everything. I mean, there's projects here in Tacoma where they're going to extend it all the way down to the community college at the end of town. And that's not going to be done until the year 2041. This is a streetcar. Above ground, the road they're building it on, 19th Street, is kind of like a small little highway. So it's not complicated for them to do, but we're talking well into this, 2041. That's the type of thing that pisses people off, and it makes Sound Transit really and truly look negative. People down here in Pierce County didn't vote for Sound Transit. I voted for the measure because I wanted to see better transportation. However, I think Sound Transit is putting a lot of priority in places where you're not going to see a lot of population growth. You just do the math. Bellevue, it looks great on paper. Redmond, all of those places, when we're talking about the east side, look great on paper. But when it comes to realistic population growth, you're not going to see that. The reason is too expensive. You're not going to see, there's not going to be a lot of density outside of downtown Bellevue. You're not going to see a lot of that in Redmond. Yeah, you have a lot of businesses and things like that and big companies. But when we're talking about future population growth, it's not going to be a place that's booming. Who can afford it when there's other options? Again, people vote with their pocketbook and they vote with their feet. They're not going to go over to a place where it's $1 million to buy a home when they can go to other places and it's not even close to $500,000 to buy a home. And you get more land, you get more everything. It just doesn't make any sense. And so what happens is that places like Tacoma and Everett and other places have a surge in population, huge amount of people, and very little transit options. Whereas other places, the population is much smaller and they have a whole lot of transit options and everything closes at 9 o'clock. These corporate businesses over there in Bellevue are done by 6, 7 o'clock. You know what I'm saying? Like, everything shuts down. Here, you have more people living on this side of town, and so it becomes a problem. So I get it. I get why people are upset. I'm equally disturbed by it. But these businesses are losing money, and here's what Sound Transit should do. There should be a contingency fund set up when we're talking about communities, because most of the light rail system that's being built, they block off, and if you look in Seattle, there are areas where you can still get to where you need to, and they're building underground, so they're not impacting people as bad. Yeah, people may feel trembles and vibrations as it goes underground as they're digging, but the streets are not blocked off. Here, when you're working in neighborhoods and you're building a streetcar, they're shutting off big sections of the street, and you can't get to it. So that's a problem. They should actually have contingency funds set up like they did in Albuquerque with the BRT line that they're building. During the construction of that, businesses were impacted, and basically the city had a fund where they were actually helping businesses supplement. Now, they may not give them the full amount of what they probably would have got, but they're getting something so that they can actually keep people employed. This starts to affect the economy because then people have to lay folks off. The city still wants its money in terms of taxes. So the city's not going to care whether or not this pizza joint is losing $20,000 a month. They don't care. At the end of the day, this guy still has to pay taxes to the city. It's the truth. When he has to, I just looked at my thing for the business license. When he has to renew his business license, it's going to be the same cost, whether he loses $20,000 a month or whether he still gains $20,000 or $30,000 a month extra. He's still going to have to pay that big amount of money. And he has to also pay workers' compensation and all the expenses that go along with owning the business. So there's nothing there to help him or any of the other businesses that are there. And so it really, it creates this rift because the city nor Sound Transit is actually putting money to the side that will help business owners in this time of need. And you would think that they would. Again, other places have done that. Albuquerque, for example, did that. And so while it still sucked for a lot of businesses, it was a little bit more of an easier pill to digest. And that project still hasn't started yet. Like the route is done, but they still haven't actually got the BRT system up and running there yet because there's an issue with the buses that they got, and it was just a whole issue. But the other side of this is Sound Transit is pretty much providing a long-term solution to a problem that has been ignored for a long time. Hilltop never had investment in it from outsiders. This is a historically Black community. Most of the businesses that were there were Black owned. Those businesses are starting to dissipate a little bit because gentrification and things like that. But this is a community that had a lot of struggles. And so, now people can say, I remember there was potholes that had been there for years. The city never did anything about it, or this and that happened, nothing was done. And now there's a lot of attention because Hilltop is kind of the next area where it is really underdeveloped. You'll find lots that are just grass that you can still develop on. There's buildings that are there, that an old storefront where people can easily move right in and take it over and set up a business. And you're also getting a light rail system built through there. So for some people who have been there for a while, this is kind of a good thing because they're investing in the community finally. But it's also a bad thing because property values are going to shoot through the roof, which some people will say is a great thing. But when you're on a fixed income, you're a senior citizen, your taxes going up that high, it's not fun. So that's part of the issue. Part of this whole equation to me is a human issue. And that's hard for some people in this country to get and grasp. Some people just don't care. If it's not affecting them personally, they don't care. When it starts to affect them, that's when they start to care. But to me, this is a human issue. The business owners that are being affected, the individuals who have been there for decades being affected because of the price going up. These are folks who have been affected because their business is going down. This is a human issue. So I think that there are things that Sound Transit should do and the city should do to actually mitigate both. And it's not that hard for them to do that, to be honest with you, because it's been done other places. There's no excuse. But with that said, this is an investment into the future. Finally, Hilltop is getting an investment in it. This is a long-term project. It's going to actually start to make accessibility from that neighborhood into downtown and into the region a lot better for people who are able to stay there. And so it's something that's really and truly going to boost the community. Now, you're going to probably see a lot more high-density buildings go up in Hilltop. So some people are not going to like that because you're changing the entire character of the community. But it is an opportunity possibly for those small businesses that have been there forever to actually get more clientele. Now, here's the question. Are those same people that are moving in going to go to those existing businesses? And that's one of those things where it's probably going to be a no, to be honest with you. But hopefully there can be strategies that the city will do to actually address that issue and make it so that Hilltop keeps its character. Now, it's important to me, and I think to a lot of people, that communities keep their character. If you go to Seattle, you'll see communities that once were one particular way and just gone. Like the whole vibe of the community is gone. When people say that Seattle is dead, it's not in the sense that Seattle is just dead. Obviously, you can look at the economy of Seattle and tell that it's not. But the way of life that people remember and the neighborhood store that they would go to, or people talk about it here in Tacoma even, like downtown Tacoma before the Tacoma Mall was built, people used to go to the different stores down there and talk, and you would run into people every single day that you knew, and it was a community. That changed with the Tacoma Mall. And so then downtown just fell into the doldrums. It's starting to pick back up drastically now. But if you look at Seattle, same thing, where neighborhoods that really and truly had a general fabric, and these were not just Black neighborhoods. Keep in mind, Seattle was once the most whitest city in the country. These were communities of different groups of people, mostly all white. And so the community store, the pharmacy, the doctor's offices, all those different things that really made Seattle what it was, and certain areas that made it the grunge city, just started to just flake off, right? And so those neighborhoods have changed drastically. And then you have community animosity, right? Now other communities are like, we don't want the Seattle effect. We don't want the people from Seattle to come here. We don't want the businesses of Seattle to come here. We don't want our neighborhood to just go away. And so that's something that I think a lot of people are worried about as we start to see more of Sound Transit building into different communities. So we're on a weird cusp, because Tacoma on one end is getting light rail and it's being done by Sound Transit. Sound Transit does a much better job than the Seattle Department of Transit. The SDOT is horrible. Like SDOT is building all of the streetcar systems up there in Seattle, and they're doing a pretty bad job of it. It's not just me saying that. A lot of people will say that. It's just they're not good. And a lot of people wish Sound Transit was doing that project. Sound Transit knows what they're doing. I have to give them that. They know what they're doing when it comes to building the system and all of that. Like they do a good job of the construction of things, but a bad job in terms of the timeline. It's just a little bit too long in many aspects. But anyhow, what do I know? They know a whole lot more about that than I ever will. They have all the models, all the expensive software that can tell them things that I'm not going to even know. I'm not a structural engineer or any of that type of stuff. I don't know nothing about soil conditions and all that stuff. So they're probably right on time and right on target. But still, that doesn't mean that people aren't going to be pissed. Anyhow, hope you guys enjoyed this video. Make sure you like, share, and subscribe. And until next time, I will see you. Take care.